So everybody, thank you for the coming to Privacy Talk. I'm so quite honored the welcoming the Jeff from the United States. He's very excellent to work on the privacy space. So the Jeff, thank you for coming today.
Thank you very much for having me today.
First of all, I share his profile. Jeff Kluge is enabled child technology ethics for business. He built a well-respected and successful investment management and advisory business for 25 years, serving the founders and the venture capital community as a mentor, strategist, and educator. It is, though, that experience and bring the entrepreneurial business and ethical perspective that he advises today's innovators and technologists in their enablement of age-appropriate design calls. Design with Kids Tech Ethics is Jeff's aim to build the global leading toolkit and consulting firm by helping the business operationalize global kids code and serving the best interest of the children. Jeff was in the first cohort to become for humanity certified auditor, children's code, and has earned his distinction through drafting certification schemes for GDPR children's code, UK GDPR, and co-authored and the body of knowledge on age assurance. So Jeff, again, thank you for coming to this interview.
Thank you for having me, Kohei.
Thank you. First of all, I want to explore with you about your history. So you did a great job in the financial space, and you changed your field to the child ethics. So why did you start to work for the child technology and ethics? So could you share about the story?
Sure. Back when I was a child, 12 years old, 13, my family brought home an Apple II computer. And very quickly, I taught myself how to reprogram some games that I had at the time and found it fascinating. Unfortunately, my worldview wasn't all that big at the time, and I went where everybody told me to go, which was finance, and built a successful career there. But there was this always interest in technology that helped shape some of investment strategy and the clients that I built an affinity around over that 25-year period. I had a life pivot moment where really began to focus on how we make our own decisions. How do we go about living our values of what we state we do and what we do? And how can organizations put that into practice? And I found myself circling back to AI ethics, artificially intelligent ethics, where now we're trying to teach machines ethics. And as part of a drafting team at For Humanity, we were working on drafting audit criteria for GDPR children's code. And it felt like I was coming home to when I was that 13-year-old thinking about technology and how it impacts kids today. And the rest is now the building and process of trying to make ethical technology for kids and helping people get it right.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that very impressive story. You also started working on your new initiative, the Kids Tech Ethics. You published a very important article on the website, your activity. So could you share about your work in the Kids Tech Ethics and what this initiative is looking at for the future?
Kids Tech Ethics is focused on making online spaces and digital experiences safer for kids on a global basis. There are some things that are harmonized California in the United States passed back in September their version of age-appropriate design code that wasn't quite cut and paste from the UK version. They made it a bit of their own, but it was pretty close. And there's a simplicity to the code, even though there's confusion, because if people step back and think about what is in the best interest of a child, perhaps what would you do as a parent? What would you want someone to do for your child? Then you can begin to approach how to build your technology platform in a better way that we really have not thought about in the 25 years or so that technology has been more digitized, more interactive, and social media centric with children these days. And I saw this need, this opening in the market of consultancy and sound business strategy that could be around kids. And that's why I created Kids Tech Ethics.
Yeah, that's very awesome. I think that you are doing a great job in the days, and but probably there is some issues that your initiative has to solve your project. So is there any specific problems that you're facing this time to lead this initiative, especially for the kids and ethics? Because it's becoming, but there's still a lot of company was struggling to do it. On your past interview, you mentioned that a lot of the company is not doing a lot about the kids and ethics this moment. So could you share about any challenges that you're facing this time?
Sure. You've done some great homework so far. I appreciate that. Age assurance, or the idea that businesses, websites, must understand the age of their user. And there's a phrase that comes after that: with certainty, with precision, almost, not quite the same, but you need to understand how old your user is. And people haven't thought about that before. And the struggle today is a balance of how do you protect one's privacy, their age, their gender, their geography, who they are. How do you protect that and yet validate how old they are in engaging in a website? And what kind of friction is there in that transaction of trying to get online and having that age verified? Some are trying at this point to use facial detection. The program looks at the face, creates an algorithm, and begins to compare that to other algorithms to understand where is this age estimation. And in the lack of nothing better, that's okay. But there is still a high degree of error in doing that. It happens over the age of 21, and more so under the age of 21 and 18, children. So many websites could be letting or allowing children to pass through a 13-year-old, let's call it an age gate, that are much younger. And therein lies the difficulty. How do we understand that age? And there are some laws that have been in existence for a while. COPPA in the United States. I think Singapore is beginning to work on one. Other jurisdictions around the world are beginning to put in some other forms of age verification, age assurance. And when parents have control under the age of 13, I think that makes it a bit easier. It's this gap, the 13 through 17, that I think will cause a bigger problem. And we really just need business regulators coming together to find some better way to do it than what's being done today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to move on the next topic. So on the previous chapter, you mentioned about the age-appropriate design call. I think it's a bit of the different from the traditional child regulation about this new movement. So could you tell us about the details of the age-appropriate design code and how this new kind of approach will be coming to the child ethics space?
Sure. A big focus for child-centric technology is how do you collect, use, process, and then deliver content to your end user that is age appropriate, whether they are under 13, 13 to 17, or 18 plus. How are the recommendation engines you are building using the data that you gather to deliver the next item? That really is a big key and a central point to a lot of what's happening in children's ethical technology today. The use of geolocation is now limited to the extent that it is not critical to the delivery of that service. If you're just gathering their geolocation data for use at another time, you can't do that. Parental consent under 13, I think I mentioned before, that seems fairly straightforward. But some of that complication is in the recommendation engines. What do you deliver next? And what is viewed as the best interests of the child? And I think a lot of that can be centered on and addressed when someone does a data protection impact assessment that is modified or geared specifically to children. So a children's data protection impact assessment, some have referred in a way to the child rights impact assessment. They're not quite the same thing, but the intent is the same. It's getting the business to think about the direction, what they're doing with children's data that they're collecting.
Yeah, thank you. In addition, in California, you mentioned that you started on the age-appropriate design code, and this is a little bit different from the origination in UK. So could you share any of the difference of the California version of the age-appropriate design code from the UK original versions?
California does have a parental consent blanket, if you will, that is already established through COPPA, the Child Online Protection Privacy Protection Act, that was completed in the near 2000s, late 1990s. So that does cover some of the under 13, but it has allowed for businesses to gather other information. The UK version, and there is a part in California that highlight collecting any other information outside of what's needed to verify the age is not acceptable. That would violate the law. So that stands in some contrast to the established law of COPPA. Trying to think of the fine, the regulatory piece is different in California. For negligence, someone that just doesn't do the right thing around children, the fine is $2,500 US per child. If it's deemed gross negligence, that may be a sense where you have absolutely ignored the law. You have done data processing in a intimate way or gathered more information than you should have. And if that's deemed gross negligence, the fine is then $7,500 US per child. That could be very expensive for businesses that have large children populations in the state. The other distinction, I believe, and I don't have inside information to this, but I think the state attorney general in California will be more of a stick in terms of enforcement than has the UK regulatory body, the ICO. They have been much lighter in terms of their enforcement and fines to business. You've seen the Ireland Data Protection Authority, you've seen Portugal that have levied much more substantial fines for violation of children. I think California will be equally of that magnitude. I think the enforcement will be much stricter in California.
Yeah, I suppose it's coming to protect the fundamental rights for the kids. It's a priority for the businesses as well. So on your article, I have read up, and that's very interesting for the board member of the business to make the decisions, especially creating of the new business for kids and child. So you mentioned on the Medium article, that's a very important point. The 5 pillars to concerns about the board member to make a practice for the appropriate design for kids. So could you share about your ideas? What will be required for privacy professional under the age appropriate design code, especially for the business board members, what they have to keep in mind to do their own business?
Sure. I don't think that there has been much awareness created yet at the board level. Maybe at the very large companies, if you look at big tech, if we put that as a category, they may have more awareness. But as you begin to come down in size of business, I don't think the board members have fully understood yet how big of an impact age-appropriate design codes will have on the business. I've talked to several board members to date where they are relying upon the data privacy officers in the business, the legal counsel, to come forward and basically tell them what needs to be done or tell them strategy. And I think that's lazy might seem a bit, but I think that's a bit naive. I think board members should be very proactive, understanding how age-appropriate design will impact the business, how it could be an advantage, a competitive advantage, if the business really began thinking about how could we deliver something better to kids. And in some jurisdictions, I think the board could have a liability, whether it's the board position, directors and officers insurance, cyber-related security insurance policies that might have to pay out because a company violated, was fined. And I think the more that people are aware of how these laws are going to affect kids and affect the business and data collection, I think people will begin to build better, more ethical, and I've written about more virtuous technology that can be selfless and really designed to be the benefit for the user, as opposed to today, I think we have a still self-centered set of technology that's really focused on the business metrics as opposed to the customer metrics. And I think that will begin to change over the coming years.
Yeah, I agree. The ethical mindset strongly required to build up the business model for the next step of the technology. And you also mentioned about the Medium article about the ethical technology in a kids space, because there is many new innovations such as the AI or other technical solutions. But those technology has some aspects. Of course, they are better for society, but there's some concerns to make a biases or to make a discrimination, or those are challenges for the tech sectors as well. So could you share about what does it needs to implement ethical technology for the future?
Meaning, what is the question? What does the business need to do to implement ethical technology?
Yes, I think two aspects for the business side, engineer side, what they have in mind to develop the ethical technology.
I think a big question comes to how is the user going to be impacted, and what comes next for the user after engaging with our technology? Are we lifting them up? Are we delivering content that is good for them, or are we delivering something that continues a level of engagement that one may view as a wormhole that is just negative and just fear, delivery of content that is somewhat extreme that keeps somebody engaged? I don't know of any study that says that that's good for people. There are multitude of studies that talk about the level of well-being, the detrimental well-being for people that are on social media or get this negative content delivered. I think engineers have a really good place to just start thinking differently of how can we do this better? How can we do this in a way that respects privacy of the individual? How do we gather data? How do we process? How do we put it into an algorithm, a learning machine language learning model with consent? There was just a big announcement that a video platform was gathering all of the video information that they were going to start using. And it wasn't very transparent of how they were going to do this or how people could opt out. I just don't think that's good for consumers. It may begin to train model, but how much of that data is protected or copyrighted or done in a way that is still a trade secret and that's being used to train model without permission? That just doesn't seem right. And I don't know as if we have as many laws on the books that say that it's outright illegal, but it doesn't seem ethical.
Yeah, thank you for sharing these thoughts. In the end, I'm happy to ask you for your message to the listeners. You had a good, excellent works in age-appropriate design, kids and child ethics space. There is many people trying to looking at this new trend and try to implement it on the action. So could you share your own message for the listeners?
I think a great starting point for anybody that's trying to build technology today centers on how do you complete your data protection impact assessment with that fine tune of for children. So how do you go about envisioning collecting data, delivering content? How are you thinking about what's in the best interest of the child? And the opposite side of that is what could be detrimental to the well-being of the child? If we start asking those questions of ourselves and delivering an engineered response that uplifts that equation, there's going to be tremendous technology that's created and innovated around this. I use the example that if innovation were a funnel and you had one level that would hit 100 and one level down here that was a negative 100, with rules and guidelines, I think we lift the bottom up so that we have some guidelines in place. But I think that then gets the innovation to go in a different direction. It gets people to think about the positive of what can be done, as opposed to thinking about this lower end of this monetization and this eyeball capture that's occurred. So for engineering and data privacy professionals, I think there's a really great new platform. There's a new era that is coming about, really focused on data protection and privacy, specifically in the children's space. And there are some good tools that are starting to now put business language forefront to understand how to do it to uphold those legal principles that are really becoming rather harmonized on a global basis. Maybe not specifically the exact same language, but they're getting pretty close.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your great message. I was so inspired that the privacy, the value creation, the positive thinking for the business perspective. We should not just like compliances parts, but also very important to add in some of the great returns for the consumer. That is the business priorities in the future. So again, so Jeff, thank you for having this interview. I was so inspired, and it's a very great message from you. Let's keep updates and keep on work so hard for the future for the kids.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Have a great day.
Thank you.